G'day everybody, James from markets.com.au here, and today is our absolute privilege to talk to Mr. Andrew Henderson. Andrew is the principal of Professionals Mermaid Beach, as well as being the principal of the real estate agency. He serves as a director for the Professionals Real Estate Group and is the chairman of the Gold Coast zone of the Real Estate Institute of Queensland, the REIQ. He's also written 2 books, one of them is here, which I'm very happy to have a copy of, and is an award-winning real estate agent. Andrew, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me here today.
Our pleasure. So, I've done my best, but I thought in your own words, if you could give us a quick CV in under 1 minute on your past and how you got here.
Yeah, with my past, my first life was from banking. From then I moved into the real estate industry, of which I've been for the last 17 or 18 years. And I've been running my own business since 2007. So since then I've taken on a few other jobs. I'm now Director of Professionals Real Estate Group Australia and also the REIQ Zone Chair. So a couple of extra hats that I wear there to not only put my skill out there to the industry, but also give my little bit back to something that's been very kind to me.
Yeah, it's a pretty solid hat rack.
Yeah, it's a solid hat rack. At times, you think that you're juggling a lot of balls, but in the end, it's the good, I think, that you can come from getting behind the REIQ being a peak body, or the professionals being a major player in the residential market, to have your influence on where you see the direction of the industry going.
Well, in saying that, so you came from the banking sector into the real estate sector. Yep. Were there differences? Was it a hard thing to do to make that transfer? Say somebody at home wants to move into real estate? Yeah,
I suppose with the banking sector, it was very much regulated. Working for a Big 4 bank, everything has its place and it's in its place for a reason. Real estate is one of those industries that has significant amount of flexibility in it, especially for a salesperson or someone in the property management side can even have a degree of flexibility nowadays. So that's where real estate can be more, you need to be more disciplined because basically it's not that 9 to 5 job.
Yeah. So you're dictating your own terms?
Yeah, you dictate your own terms because with real estate, you're going to be available when your clients are available, and generally that's after hours, before hours, and weekends. So a significant difference between banking, which is traditionally Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. So that was a big shift, but not really a shift that was hard, especially if you can like that freedom that does come with the industry.
Okay, well, we're happy you made the change.
I'm happy you made the change
especially with the Royal Commission and all of these things that have come up since that time. So initially, we like to discuss the basic parameters or definitions of terms, and we've got some relatively simple ones for you, for the people that are watching. Hopefully, it'll give them a different lease on these phrases. Are you able to explain permanent letting for me? And then we'll go into sort of what is the difference between permanent letting and then the shorter term letting scenarios, your holiday letting or short term letting?
Yeah. So permanent letting is where you have a tenant that's on a lease term of 6 months, 12 months, or sometimes into years. So that becomes their home. Generally, a lot of times they're unfurnished. That becomes their point of residence, where your short-term letting is very much towards your holiday accommodation side of it. So people stay for 1 day, 2 days a week. So that's the difference. It's more of your tourist market, your holiday market, or your very short-term.
Okay, and then self-managed property versus bringing on a property manager. I know that you may have a stronger opinion on this because it's the sector that you manage the most at the office. So what are sort of the pros and cons of each of those?
Okay, so there's nothing stopping anybody having their own self-managed property to look after. Like, it can be done. And with that is that there are challenges that come with that, and probably part of the reason that our business grows is that self-managing of residential property is becoming more difficult. Government red tape basically gives us a job because that red tape makes it very difficult for the average person in the street to manage their own job, their own finances, their own family, plus then all the red tape that goes with it. So that's where the benefits lie. So when it comes to someone self-managing it, is how are they at rent collection? How are they at chasing up arrears? Can they evict a family who falls behind in arrears? can they defend themselves at QCAT? Can they keep appropriate documentation for ledgers for rent payment, which is a part of the Act, and as self-managed, you've still got to comply with the Act like a real estate agent does. Okay. So really everything the real estate agent does, you as a self-managed person still needs to do exactly the same. And hence that's where the challenge comes in, where in the past self-managed was a lot easier. As time goes on, it becomes a very difficult challenge. And with the busy world that people have, also the time to be able to do it. Where on the other hand, you give it to a property manager, they've got the expertise, they've got the time, they deal with it day to day. Potentially they're one step away emotional, because an owner-tenant relationship that is very close often can also be to the negativity of the owner if the tenant comes up with a sob story or something along those lines. And with rental tenancies nowadays, the Act is very strict when it comes to non-compliance, and that's where people dealing with it as their main job, doing it every day of the week, obviously potentially have more ready access to knowledge to be able to make sure they comply.
And access to a network. So say something breaks down or something stops working, then they're already on the ground. They're a phone call away for the tenant, and they can handle that issue.
Resources are one of those things, especially trades. Trades can be difficult to get there in a short space of time. If you've got a good relationship with trades, they'll obviously bump you to the top of a queue. Where we're dealing in trades very regularly, so hence be able to get a tap fixed or glazing done, we can normally get it done in a very short period of time. Whereas an owner as an individual, often it's going to the website to Google, then to try and get a tradesman. Are they appropriate qualified? Are they appropriately insured? All these things that potentially don't really seem like very big deals, but if the wrong person, the wrong trade, the wrong glass is installed, it can have big repercussions down the track.
Yeah, that's all very sound advice. I would agree with it wholeheartedly. I mean, if somebody is in a position then that is their role and that's their job permanently, then they're there to facilitate and hopefully assist you. But then everything's negotiable as well, I take it. So then if the owner wishes to negotiate, say, a fee, then I'm sure that there's that conversation that occurs. Yeah,
there is. Every owner's got different demands that they have. Some owners that live overseas want you to pay their rates, their body corporate pretty well. I've got some owners that we pay land tax for, because it gets to a stage that they've got big positions, that they're busy, they don't have time for that, they want to set and forget property management. I've got other owners that really just want that rent collection basis, because they realise that that's the softest part of if a tenant comes with a sob story of where they're going to give in, but they like to do their own maintenance. I've got some owners, it's a bit of a mixture, is that they like to pay their rates, water and body corporate, but then want us to do routines and rent collection. So we can incorporate it basically either on a fixed fee or then a fee for service basis.
It's an interesting part that I don't think a lot of people would factor into their process, because you assume that in your nature you're somebody who would pay someone every week. Then it's not something that you factor into expecting a tenant may not actually do that, but unfortunately it's a situation that occurs far too often.
It does. And then with the tenant not paying the rent, your bills still accumulate. You've still got to pay your rates, you've still got to pay the water, you've still got to pay your land tax. Those don't stop. But if a tenant stops paying rent, obviously then you don't have the income to go with it. And providing free accommodation for someone is really not a landlord's job. And that, unfortunately, with private rentals, I've seen in the past too often, becomes the reason then we get involved and take over management, is that owners have been taken advantage of.
And then you've got the RTA, the Residential Tenancy Authority, is that correct?
That's the one.
And then they have certain guidelines, I assume. So say you wished to move people on and sell your home and you don't do it in the correct parameters, I assume that not having that knowledge could also turn around and bite you.
Yeah, the RTA obviously have the law, that they stick to the law. The RTA are a little bit more sympathetic towards the tenant. If an owner serves a paperwork and it's one day out, generally it will be totally rejected. If you go to the RTA or to QCAT and the tenant happens to be one day out with their paperwork, generally they'll be forgiven. So when it comes to the crunch, is that you've really got to have expert advice and do it properly and do it to the letter of the law, because any left opening gives the tenant either stays longer rent-free because our court system is clogged up. So by the time you then get another court date, it can be another 6 or 8 weeks, there's another 6 or 8 weeks without rent, and it goes on in cycles from there. So paperwork is important. Following Act is ultimate guidance when it comes to it. And the RTA have some very heavy fines and can do some, court proceedings should they wish to on their side, which is all taxpayer funded, where a landlord that might make an innocent mistake then has to go and get legal or representation in a situation.
And then it just starts that process that it can be avoided if possible, can be avoided.
Communication's the big part of it, and paperwork is a big part of it. Is it making sure everything's documented, everything's in writing. Those things make a big difference, because if you've got that backup, if you do need to prove your position, it makes your evidence a lot stronger than trying to remember a phone call that happened 6 or 12 months prior.
Very valuable advice, and thank you for that. So now I suppose we're going to move on to talking about the market and the marketplace in general. Talking about the Gold Coast market. And then the other processes that a property manager would have to fulfill. So I thought we'd start with, what is the role of a property manager? I know that's pretty broad, but if we can what does it encapsulate?
Well, I suppose you'd probably take one step back. Property management is probably more of a people manager than a property manager.
Understood.
When it comes to really the depth of looking after someone's property, it's the person involved, whether that be the person, the owner, as the client, or the person as the tenant who's the client. So that's probably the most important relationship of it, because the property itself is bricks and mortar or whatever it be made of. It really comes down to the personalities and the people involved is the biggest part of it. But to go, I suppose, into more of the job role, it's making sure the tenant goes into a safe, clean property that's fit for occupation. Making sure that the rent's collected and appropriately accounted for, and then appropriately dispersed to the owner. Making sure maintenance is undertaken in a timely manner. Make sure routine inspections are undertaken in a timely, in a regular manner, to make sure the house is being looked after by the tenant, or any potential maintenance issues that the tenant mightn't be aware of, to be able to make sure the house is sound and stable. Then it goes, I suppose, further into it, the process of then moving the tenant on if they're not paying the rent or not looking after it, or tenants do change the type of property they want. All of a sudden they have a family, they might want to move it to a unit, to a house. So then it's that whole process of the vacate, going to the inspection. Does it meet the way that the tenant went in? Taking away fair wear and tear. So it's a process that has a lot of grey to it, and sounds, in theory, to be quite easy. But every property is different, every person's different, the length of tenancy is different, the quality of materials of building is very different. So they all have a factor in that role that the property manager plays.
Which I suppose would be a benefit to your day-to-day. So at least it's not the same thing every day. There's a new challenge that you and your team have to sort of combat.
No 2 days are the same, because again, every property is different, and what goes on externally in someone's life can have a bearing on that particular day or that particular week or that particular tenancy. So that's also something that needs to be taken into account. What I've worked out is that you've got to be able to streamline processes that are streamlined, and certain things like communication is that you can't do it all by email or SMS. Picking up the telephone is probably one of the most vital roles it plays in property management, because as much as you can write an email about a problem that might be occurring at a property, to go and view it and then make the phone call to the owner so then they have a bit more of an understanding can circumvent the actual how long something takes to get rectified or repaired, or a situation sorted out if, for example, the tenant might be without one of the bathrooms for a while, maybe some rent compensation, things like that. So there's always different facets to it. A lot of it comes down to the negotiation to try and get a fair outcome for the owner, a fair outcome for the tenant, but also within legislation.
Is there legislation around pets? We do get that question quite a bit.
At the moment in Queensland, pets are at the discretion of the owner. and obviously then potentially some body corporates. Now, with that, in Queensland, you cannot take any pet bond, so you can only have normal pet bond. So any damage caused by tenants, potentially then, is something that an owner has to factor in with the acceptance of pets.
What if an owner wants something like a pet bond?
Can't have it.
They just can't have it.
In Queensland, is that your maximum bond amount is 4 weeks rent, equivalent 4 weeks rent, up maximum. If you're at more than $700 per week, so $701 per week, you then can take 6-8 weeks rent, whatever that you do like. So it's under $700, maximum 4 week, no pet bond, no additional bonds can be taken.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So there are stringent laws which often self-managed owners can trip themselves up on, because no act of government is easily written or easily understood. It's not written in plain English, and they often refer back to parts, to another section, But then incorporating that is what's gone through QCAT or what's gone through court that potentially then puts a precedence in place for that act as well.
Yeah. So when it comes to the form side of things, is there a plethora of forms? Would it be too hard to discuss, or what would be the basic ones? Because we discussed inspections before, and my understanding is there need to be forms on those inspections. You can't just walk in the door. No. So can we summarise?
Obviously most forms are government issued.
Yeah. Okay.
So and there is a whole number of forms, and their number accordingly, and a lot of them are required by law, such as an entry condition report on what's the property like when the tenant moves in, of which the tenant's then given a copy to then reply back within 3 days of any changes to that report, and it's signed off by agent, owner and or tenant.
That's very important, that form. And I would recommend that if an agent doesn't give that to you and you're a tenant, seek it, because it will protect both of you.
Yeah, it's actually law that's actually going to be given.
Good.
More and more photographs are coming with that. Now that is a prescribed document of what it has to be done on that entry condition report.
Yeah.
You cannot have a third party form. The government issue a form. That's the only one referred to in the Act that is legal and binding when it comes to if it gets taken any further, should there be any dispute on the vacate. So if a tenant wants to then get an app and use that, when it goes to QCAT or if it goes further or to the RTA,
it won't be
the
binding.
Act is very specific. It needs to be on the prescribed document.
Okay.
But along with that, obviously there's a standard lease document. Again, that is government. Often institutions like the REIQ have some annexure pages that go with that protect the rights of both tenants and owner. And along with that, there's entry notices and time frames for entry for routine inspections or maintenance to be undertaken. Should a owner not comply with maintenance, the tenant can breach the owner, and should a tenant not comply with the lease, then the owner can breach the tenant. So there is a number of forms. And when it comes, I suppose, back to the process of, say, application forms, that really comes down to agency on what information they seek. But everything's done under the Privacy Act. Yeah. And the reason why application forms are done is that rental affordability is one of them, is to make sure that the tenant's got the ability to afford the rent. You don't want to put someone in a property and then not have the ability, and then they're struggling from day one. It doesn't benefit the tenant, doesn't benefit the agent, doesn't benefit the owner. Also to make sure that their ledger from their previous rental history is in order, to make sure that they did pay their rent on time, or if they were served any breach notices, so hence references are checked, licences, bank accounts, things like that, but it all remains private. It's really only for that application process, and most people understand that in the world today, to be able to prove who you are, to prove you're of good nature, to be able to get into a rental property. I think if you can do that, you put yourself a long way in front of the queue if it is a tight rental market.
Are people restricted to the amount of applications they put in across different properties?
No.
Because it's an agency thing.
Yeah, you can put in applications all over the place. It doesn't matter. It's not going to do any harm to you, and then you can take the first one that comes along or take your preferred one that comes along. It really depends on the individual. Often, from experience, tenants, they particularly like one property, so they'll more focus on one to begin with, but I suppose it depends on their needs, their desires, maybe their partner and then might want different places, and potentially which one comes up first becomes the one they take.
The winner.
So there's a whole lot of parts to that segment that really comes down to the individual.
Yeah. Where can people find those forms? Is it on the REIQ website?
Yeah.
The annexures?
No. So with the annexures would be through the agent, of which the agent will provide application forms. The agent would be happy enough to provide copies of lease documentations, because with all our tenants, they're given a copy of the lease document to peruse, to read before they sign it. Because it is a legal document of which that they are bound, so hence the understanding of it. The good part about those forms, they are written in plain English, unlike the Act itself. So they are easy enough to follow. They're not super complicated. They're not in small, fine print. It's a pretty good document that is understandable by a person that may not have any experience in renting a property, can generally have a read of a lease document and have a fairly good understanding in a short period of time.
Okay. And before speaking to a property manager, what would you recommend, or what would be your tips for people when they're trying to locate the right property manager for them?
So as an owner?
As an owner, yes.
Yeah. I think local is one good thing. A couple of factors to that is that they're more likely to be driving past the property. They're more likely to have other properties in the area, which becomes then beneficial on rent reviews because they potentially know that market. And in large cities, you can have many markets across a city. So Gold Coast, you might have units being in demand where houses aren't. You might have Northern Corridor being in demand and other areas not. So potentially that local knowledge goes a long way, and just simply being able to keep an eye on the property. Is someone parking on the front lawn? Are they keeping it really neat and tidy? And that's a good comment to pass on to your owner to say, they really are looking after the property. So that's one advantage, is it being local. I think the experience of the property manager, because when it comes to it, a lot of property management is that as much as you can have laws and understanding, I think reading between the lines becomes a big part of it. Gut feeling becomes a part of it. Just going through the experiences and what you learn along the way becomes a crucial part, because you can read the theory of a textbook 25 times. You can put that into practice and throw that textbook out the window. And that's where experience wins over textbook every day of the week. Is if someone is experienced to know what's an emergency repair, what potential questions to ask if a tenant's got no power. If you then send an electrician out, they don't go for free. But it could be their toaster that's just flipped the safety switch. So it might be a case of unplugging the toaster, getting a new toaster, or just flicking the switch, putting a new toaster in, and the whole problem's fixed. So then it saves a tenant a call-out fee. So that helps with that experience of a property manager that your theory in your textbook's never gonna cover. So and also the potential, the bookkeeping side of it, to make sure rent's collected and rent's receipted and rent's dispersed properly, because when it comes to it, your rent becomes part of your taxation. And also on a tenant side of it is when they vacate, they're very much entitled to a rental ledger. And to have that efficiently and given to them properly is a part that, making sure the bookkeeping of that agency is up to scratch.
I didn't even think. That's a very good point. So how would someone check that though with their manager, that they're sort of interviewing, if you will, for finding the right manager?
Yeah, I suppose a lot of it comes from word of mouth, and I think
okay.
if you've got clients that have been around for a long time and happy with your service, they generally will be happy enough to speak to someone along those lines. Mm-hmm. Obviously, review sites now are getting very popular, so that gives another side of it. You can make inquiries through Office of Fair Trading. Have there's been any prosecutions against an agent? Things like that go a long way to be able to give some reassurance, because the agent's dealing with a lot of money in the value of the asset of the property, but also substantial amounts of money in rent income that they are holding. So having someone you can trust with a bit of longevity and know that your money is secure is, I think, a big part of it, because there's plenty of media, and it's easy enough to find out of agents that have done the wrong things by their trust accounts, and you really don't want to be on the end of that. Is that insurance or fidelity funds might pick up the tab, but from my experience, they take a long time for the owner to give any money back in those instances. So longevity, making sure that the cheapest is not always the best, because property management, there is a key dollar that you need to earn to pay your bills. Now, if you don't earn sufficient money and it's just a cut rate, you've got to cut your service. Otherwise, you go bankrupt. It's just pure, simple economics. Is that the cheapest ain't the best. You need someone that does the right thing by you and your property. And I think that there's enough resources out there for people to be able to find things like that. And with property managers, they're all licensed in Queensland. Find out when their licence was first issued. That'll give you a good indication on the experience that they do hold. So there are some simple ways that people can find that out.
Once again, doing your research. We pressure on that quite a bit.
Yeah. If you don't know something, you've got to go out and educate yourself. And whether that be by reading or research, internet, whatever it is that education is probably the key. In anything that you do, especially when you're dealing with such an expensive asset as the property that you've just bought as an investment, because most people have bought it to long-term provide for their retirement, or it's there to make the money. So it becomes a crucial part of either their day-to-day income or their long-term future retirement plans.
Yeah, wonderful. So I think we've covered off that particular question. The next part is going to be mostly about your opinion on the state of the Gold Coast rental market. So this is, once again, it's opinion. It changes every month and every week and every day. But sort of if we take the snapshot from today, in March 2019, what would you say would be the hotspots on the coast in the rental market at the moment?
Yeah, hotspots. I think that those areas that have got infrastructure that's either just been completed, hence like something like Westfield at Coomera, it is big infrastructure, a lot of employment. I think that helps with the rentals in that area. The light rail that's proposed, so that corridor, I think will be a strong hotspot going forward, because infrastructure creates work. It also then creates new development that goes with it. Tenants like something nice and new and the comforts that go with that. So that's areas that I would be looking at, because I think they'll be attractive to tenants. And based Gold Coast wise, a lot of those new hotspots are generally older suburbs, believe it or not. It's not like a new in place. It's places like Palm Beach that have had huge changes in the new development going on there. Even places like Broadbeach, the amount of new development, and Mermaid Beach. These original Gold Coast suburbs are potentially becoming hotspots for people to rent, because they can go downstairs, there's transport, there's cafes, there's restaurants, there's work on their doorstep, whether that be casino, convention centre. You've got some big employers. You've got Pacific Fair as a big draw card.
Food and
those
beverage.
Things, perfect. And people like convenience, and as time goes on, we get more time poor. I think they're your hotspots. You're out of areas as infrastructure creeps in, and often the development comes first, infrastructure comes second.
Surprisingly.
So maybe that wave afterwards. But I think if you're asking me today, I'd be looking at those established suburbs where there is that renewal of property going on, to where I'd be targeting if I was looking to get into the investment market, and I was looking for a long-term investment where I know I can attract a tenant if I'm priced right.
Great, that is great advice. Now, you specialise in the Mermaid Beach, Broadbeach areas, 4218 postcode specifically. Yep. So then, what are the vacancy rates? I know that I might be testing you. What are the vacancy rates at the moment?
Yeah, so vacancy rates we have seen rise over the last quarter to where we were probably what we referred to in the industry as a tight market.
Okay.
It was sub 2%, which means you had a lot of people turning up for properties with very few opportunities and multiple tenant applications coming in.
Yeah.
What we've seen is a fair few new developments come to being completed, which has put extra rental properties up for sale. So the last quarter has seen an increase to a more balanced market.
Yeah.
I feel that will be short-lived because the next wave of development completion is a while off, and I think you'll find that with that strong migration
which isn't slowing down.
Which isn't.
It's only increasing on the coast.
And also we're seeing significant number of retirees from Brisbane. Now you think, they're going to buy a house. But potentially they mightn't know where they want to live initially. Yeah. So they put their toe in the water and they'll lease somewhere. Okay, that's an area I like or I don't like or I want to be somewhere else, versus go through buying. It gives them the ability for 6 or 12 months just to test the water. Is that where they really want to be?
Keep their capital free, so then when they want to move, they can move quickly.
Exactly right, and make sure they're making the right move, because obviously purchasing a property with stamp duty can be a big expense.
Correct.
Where potentially the rental side of it is an easier way if you're not 100% sure on that's a suburb or that's a street or that's a location that you want to be in.
Now, why are vacancy rates important for the investor?
Obviously, the lower the vacancy rate will generally mean that it does have an increase in rents. But when you've got a growing area like the Gold Coast with new developments coming online, is you're going to have fluctuations. And I think taking it from quarter to quarter is a bit too of a short-term approach. You've probably got to look year on year. And what we've found is that we've been driven by an owner-occupied market purchaser now for probably 3 to 5 years, which has put the squeeze on tenants. Development's been a little while catching up behind it. So hence that tenants are being pushed further out. I think of any changes in policy, if it does abolish negative gearing or increase the threshold for the capital gains tax, potentially that could put super pressure on rents, and it will force tenants further and further out to where there are new developments, to where negative gearing is still able to be conducted, where your inner city areas or those close to good infrastructure or good restaurants or work will potentially be only left to the owner-occupier to buy.
Yep, beautiful. So Andrew, we were talking about vacancy rates. Now the up and coming area side of things. Once again, we wouldn't hold it to you because things change. But where have you got your eye on, or where have you been speaking to people who are interested in these up and coming areas?
Very much same. I think a lot of those established areas will continue to be strong. I think given the flexibility of the workforce into the future, where a lot of people having that 9 to 5 Monday to Friday in the CBD office doesn't exist as much as today as it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago it was the norm. Every person went to the office in Melbourne on Monday and they finished on Friday. Where now, if you go to Coolangatta Airport Thursday night, Friday night, you'll see the same faces coming back and forth, and then they'll fly back on the Monday or the Sunday. So hence they don't need to be here. Or a lot of them will work different places, so things like hot desks. So that has a big potential for the Gold Coast going forward. I think the airport is a critical part of that. So in and around the airport, I can think going forward, we'll have a significant increase in tenancy demand, but just demand in general by that person who doesn't want to sit in the capital city, traffic for an hour and a half to get to work, an hour and a half to get home, when their flight time is less. By the time they can arrive back in Sydney on a Monday afternoon to go to work on the Tuesday, on the Monday morning they can run their whole management team office from their house on the Gold Coast, is becoming, it's already there. I see it all the time where people that own big legal firms or big executives having Gold Coast homes of which they're permanent residents. Their children are in a school here. Yep. Their wives are here. They're spending 3 or 4 days a week here, and their capital city office is where they base themselves for their couple of days a week, but they can really live on the move. Technology's allowed for that.
Correct.
And the airport allows that too. You still need face-to-face meetings. As much as Skype and other means are available,
they assist.
A lot of those high-end meetings still need to be done eyeball to eyeball, and that won't go away. But again, they are getting less and less.
Yeah, that flexibility in the workplace, I think we've also identified as an important point that will sort of hold the Gold Coast in good stead for the next few years. Because you can go for a surf in the morning, or you can go for a hike in the morning, and then go get a coffee with very little hassle, and then go home, get on your laptop, work for 5-10 hours, and then do it all again.
Yeah. And I suppose one part of that shows it to me is that if you look at it, the Gold Coast got some of the best surgeons in the whole country based here. Yeah. Now, the reason they're based here is they want the lifestyle to live here. And if people need certain surgery, they will travel here to get that done.
Yeah.
And to me, that nearly says it all. They're here for the lifestyle to go with it, and people will come and see them. And that a lot of industries that will become the same going forward. And the Gold Coast has some of the best hospitals. It's got some of the best education. It's got a progressive council. It's got, I suppose, a history of development and going forward that the majority of the population are right behind that. Yeah. Even long-term residents that have been here 40 or 50 years, like my family, they came to the Gold Coast, it was progressive. They moved here 40 or 50 years ago. They want to still see it progress. Yeah. And I think the majority of people want to see that. They want to see the change that goes with it. And I think as long as no one stands in that way, if someone wants something more quieter, there are rural places, there are hideaways that they can escape to. But for us is that we've got to keep high on the tourist side of it. We've got to keep our lifestyle high as well. And I think the way we do that is to give people property where they want to live, and we've got to keep covering for the strong migration numbers that we've got. We don't want a closed door like Noosa. No, that's the last thing we want. It's not the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast is open. It's open to everyone. It's open for business, and we want the development. Yeah. And
I think on that note, we'll leave it there. It was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you very much, James.
My pleasure, Andrew. Thank you very much. Make sure you keep doing your research and stay tuned for more interviews, hopefully with Andrew in the next couple of months. And thank you for your time. We'll talk to you soon.